On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, it's another edition of the Locked On Raptors Book Club as Eric Smith, the radio voice of the Toronto Raptors, is here to talk about his new book, We the Raptors.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, December the 17th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Raptors for 12 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can join us on the Locked On Raptors Discord server, link in the description of the podcast. 100% free to join. As always, thanks for hopping into our listener community. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Locked On Raptors Everydayer Club. $5 a month, $50 for the year gets you ad-free episodes of the show, plus access to a special Locked On Discord. So you can go and do that. Link also in the description of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And we're off and running here on a book club edition of Locked On Raptors. It's a holiday season. You know, Oren Weisfeld was on recently to talk about his book, and we have another friend on today's show to talk about his book. It's Eric Smith, radio voice of the Toronto Raptors for Sportsnet, who is the co-author along with Andrew Bricker of We the Raptors, which you can go and get wherever fine books are sold. Now, we're going to talk about this wide-ranging look at the history of the Toronto Raptors through the eyes of 30 players throughout team history with Eric Smith. Eric, welcome in, man. It's thrilled to have you. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Sean.
Of course, man. It's great to have you on the show. And yeah, this is for anyone who's like a fan of the Toronto Raptors and like just likes to go back and be nostalgic about stuff, a really good trip through memory lane of just a bunch of dudes who played for the team. Some of them really important cogs in the machine at various times. Some of them just beloved single season role players. I think you kind of run the gamut. It does feel as though this book is very much framed though through role players more than anything. So I want to start there, Eric. You know, this franchise has had some very prominent star players. Vince Carter, Kyle Lowry wrote the foreword for this book. DeMar, Kawhi Leonard, on down the line. None of them are featured in the meat of this book. It is all guys a little bit sort of lower down the rung of importance on those teams that they were on, but all of them very important to sort of the fabric of team history. What was it about those role players, those sort of less heralded dudes that made you want to write a book centered around their experiences with the team?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right off the bat. And I say this, I'm trying to be nice and politically correct about this. There have been a few, I would say at the risk of coming out of the gate sounding arrogant, and I swear to God, I don't intend to. I think for the most part, the overwhelming support of the book has been there. And I think most people have understood what this book is about. There have been a couple of critics that are like, how can you write a book and not focus on the stars? That was the point of the book, was to write a book not focusing on the stars. I believe we even say it on the jacket of the book, let alone in my intro to the book and in Kyle's intro. The whole point of the book was to discuss the guys behind the guys, to steal the old line from the movie Swingers from back in the day, the guy behind the guy. So the reason we landed on this sort of theory, or if I dared even use the word thesis, this idea for this book was, I believe that this could be said about any major market in the world, certainly North America and certainly in the four major sports. We as sports fans often have these conversations or arguments or, you know, little chats and discussions over a beer or over a family dinner about the top 3 in franchise history, the top 5 in franchise history, the Mount Rushmore, the top 10, whatever it might be. But I feel like with the Raptors, and you would know, you're a fan of this team, let alone you've covered this team and followed this team for a long time. And you can check me on this if you think you're wrong or if you have a different guy you would throw in there. But in my opinion, the Raptors' top 5 is locked in and there's no argument. There are guys knocking on the door of top 5, but they're definitely top 10. But to me, in no particular order, and I say this in the book, it's Kyle Lowry, Vince Carter, DeMar DeRozan, Chris Bosh, Kawhi Leonard. And again, that's not in any order. Those are the 5. Fred VanVleet's knocking on the door. Pascal Siakam's knocking on the door. We could probably talk about Damon or even T-Mac, et cetera. And if we're talking top 10, those guys are all ironclad locks. But to me, the 5 are the 5. But when I think back to 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, let alone 15, 20, 25 years ago. And you think of the Raptor fan base and players that were supported in this city in terms of not only fan favorites, but fans actually buying jerseys, and guys that were getting sometimes screams as loud as, if not louder than, those top 5 guys and those top 10 guys. It was the likes of, back in the day, a Doug Christie or a Jerome Williams or an Antonio Davis or a Norm Powell and a Jonas Valanciunas and a TJ Ford and a Patrick Patterson. And the list goes on of all these dudes that fans, again, in Toronto and in Canada, arguably around the world, rallied behind, bought the jerseys, Jose Calderon, Jorge Garbajosa, et cetera, and they became, fan favorites and cult classics and became a fabric of this team. So what if we wrote a book about those guys? Because with due respect to Kyle and to DeMar and Kawhi and Bosh and Vince, with all, no disrespect intended, they should be written about a lot. They should be talked about a lot. But we've heard from them a ton. We haven't heard from these other guys as much. Yeah, maybe we heard from them when they played here, but have you heard much from them in their retirement years or since they moved on to be players on other teams or coaches or general managers on other squads? Let's tell their story of their career, of their life, of their time in Toronto, their thoughts on the Raptors, their thoughts on Canada, the GTA, et cetera. Let's get it through their lens instead of the lens of the usual suspects. And that's where the whole genesis of this book started. And that's what the whole book is essentially about.
Yeah, I mean, and as a enjoyer of the sort of unheralded dudes, I think, it hits me right in the nostalgia feels for sure, kind of flipping through the pages of this book to see those guys. I do have to say something, Eric, though. I know you think the top 5 is locked in. Totally fine. I think there's a real case to be made that Pascal Siakam should be ahead of Chris Bosh. And maybe it's just I'm a sucker for success. Maybe it's just that these were the teams I covered. So I saw Pascal up close in a way I didn't get to see Chris Bosh up close. But I think just Bosh was very good. There's no doubt about it. But I think just overall impact, the playoff contributions, the all NBA teams, the, just kind of the, for me with Pascal too, he's just sort of very indicative of what made that era of the franchise so successful. And so I feel like he kind of deserves to be a little bit higher, maybe just for narrative reasons, but we don't need to argue with each other about it. But I do have to say Pascal belongs at least in the conversation for 5.
Listen, I would not argue with you at all, Sean. I mean, I think that there's absolutely a case to be had there, and that's why. And maybe I'm couching my comments to make sure that I cover my own backside to some extent. That's why when I talk about top 5, I simply say or top 10, right? And hence the reason. With due respect, I think I've used that line twice now, with due respect to those that are in the book that gave of their time and shared their stories, I don't believe that there's anybody that is in the book that we would say, well, they should have been considered for the top 10. Right. Because again, as great as some of these players were, and not all of the guys that are in the book are just, bench guys or second unit dudes or deep rotation, deep on the bench guys. There are some starters. There are regular, mainstay guys, but I don't know if they would be ones that we would be considering within the top 10. So again, maybe it's just you and I then arguing, even though we're not arguing, the semantics of top 3, top 5, top 10, all of those guys. Because Pascal, no doubt, I guess, would it be considered recency bias for you or for me if we're talking so much about Pascal and Fred while still talking about Kyle and DeMar and Kawhi? Because there's so much more to this franchise than just what happened in the last 5 years or what happened in that sort of championship era. And I guess that's why I sort of pay homage still to a guy in Chris Bosh who was here for 3/4 of a decade, who had the multiple All-Star appearances, but yes, only had 2 playoff appearances and was the main cog and the cornerstone guy in arguably, and again I say arguably, the roughest patch of the franchise as well. Because I think we were willing, I believe, as sports fans in general, to look past any franchise or any organization in the first handful of years of an expansion franchise. It's supposed to be rough. Sure. But the Raptors went from suddenly expansion to boom, Vince Carter, to playoffs, to holy crap, what's happening? And then unfortunately, things started to take a downward slide. And through no fault of his own, who is the guy that was the best player on the team for a long time? It was Bosh. And again, that's through no fault of his own. The Raptors tried to reinvent themselves in a couple of different ways, multiple times during that era. And it wasn't until the DeMar Vince era began that things really took off, and suddenly it was a playoff team for nearly a decade, and it was a groundswell of success, and that's where the Raptors really seemed to solidify themselves. So again, I'm not going to argue with you at all over where we put certain guys, because Pascal, Fred are beyond deserving of wherever you want to put them in your top 5, top 10 rankings.
This is podcasting, damn it. We have to argue, Eric. We have to get mad. We have to debate. No.
Yeah.
I think very well said. And yeah, I do think kind of going through maybe the one guy I'd say like flirts with top 10 that you talk about. I think there's maybe two. I think Valanciunas
Yep.
and Antonio Davis, maybe Calderon, are kind of on the fringes there. But
Yep.
no, to your point, I think, and I think this is sort of the nice thing about watching sports, even when your team is going through like a dire set of years, like maybe the Raptors have the last few years. Like there's still always going to be those dudes who you latch onto, even when your team is not very good, who kind of get you through because you're just kind of, yeah, at least that's my guy. I can watch my guy every night. And I think a lot of the guys that get covered in this book certainly kind of fit that bill. I will also say this guy is not a top 10 Raptor, but I think if you asked Mike James, he would tell you he's a top 10 Raptor in franchise history. We love the Amityville scorer in these parts. We're going to come back into the side here, Eric, and get into some of the process for reporting this book out and sort of how you identified the individual guys and the sort of process for sort of determining which of the role guys at given times throughout the team's history were the guys to tell the story of those eras. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by Skims. Yes, once again, it's time to talk about Sean's underwear. And Skims, of course, has men's that you can go and purchase in addition to their women's line as well. And I got to tell you, I love them. They've sent me a few pairs over the years, and they are heavy in my rotation. They are super comfortable. I wear them when I'm just walking around the neighborhood. I wear them when I'm playing basketball. Super versatile, breathable, light. They stay in place. Everything you want from a pair of underwear. My favorite are the 5-inch cotton, but you can also get the 5-inch stretch. You can get the 3-inch boxer briefs. They're all there for you to go and peruse over at Skims website. And the fit and fabric are just like soft, supportive, comfortable all day long. They don't ride up. They don't lose their shape. They just stay where they're supposed to stay, which is like the baseline requisite for underwear, if you ask me. You can shop Skims Men's at skims.com right now. When you place your order, choose podcast in the post-purchase survey and select our show from the drop-down menu. Let them know we sent you. Plus, the Skims holiday shop is open. So if you're looking for a perfect gift this season for a guy like me in your life, Skims has you covered. Skims.com. Go check them out. Back at it here with Eric Smith talking We the Raptors by Eric Smith and Andrew Bricker, forward by one Kyle Lowry, who we like a lot in these parts. But we're not here to talk about Kyle Lowry, here to talk about the guys who make up the sort of story of Raptors history through the eyes of role players. And, you know, this book has interviews with 30 different guys who, you know, all, as we've talked about, kind of had various levels of standing within the team at their time. From all of these interviews, obviously you must have, I mean, you go in knowing a lot of stuff about Raptors history, obviously, as someone who's covered the team as long as you have and was a fan before that, as you get into in the book. But like, I'm curious, was there one thing that stands out as like the most interesting, the funniest, the sort of most surprising story that you picked up from a guy that you didn't know before as you were sort of going through the process of putting together this book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could give you a bunch of examples, and I'll tell you, even some of the stories I'm about to share, some of the stuff didn't even make it into the book. And that was another challenge, is trying to write a book that I don't even remember what our final word count was, but I do know that we ended up having to edit out about 100,000 words. So it was a lot. It was a lot.
316 we're looking at here, 318. There you go.
Oh, yeah, those are the pages. I'm talking about the words. Like I don't know.
The words, yeah.
I don't know if it's 100,000 or 120,000, but we had to chop out almost 100,000 words from the book. Wow. So there was a hefty amount of editing done over the course of the process of this. But on a personal level, like I'm talking about them getting deeply personal. Chris Childs discussing bouts with substance abuse and alcoholism and how it impacted his relationship with his children, let alone his marriage, let alone more specifically his life, and having to get his life on track before he ultimately was able to get a career on track, and how a former Raptor assistant coach and one of the longtime legends in basketball and coaching collegiately, professionally, John Lucas, is credited for getting Childs, again, his life in order by getting him into a substance abuse program and getting him clean. I thought that was deeply personal from Chris, and I knew a little bit about that, but I certainly didn't know how much Chris was going to reveal about his personal life. I thought Tyler Hansbrough talking about the struggles at times of dealing with being, to this day still, one of the greatest collegiate players in the history of the NCAA, but having the self-awareness to realize and quickly realize, man, this game at the professional level is a heck of a lot different, and I'm not the collegiate player, or I'm not the same player that I was at the collegiate level, and I'm not going to be able to have the same kind of impact or the same kind of career, and I have to morph into being a superstar and become a role player. And choosing Toronto because he felt that it was the best destination for him, because it was the best coach for him in Dwayne Casey, but then realizing after the fact, maybe it ultimately wasn't the best spot for me, and it wasn't the best coach, but it was me that was the problem, not the team, not the coach, not the program, and it was me not adjusting. So the self-awareness again, and the honesty coming from a Tyler Hansbrough. I think of Patrick Patterson openly admitting, I did not want to come to Toronto. I did not want to be here. I wanted to get out immediately. And it was my mom who set me straight and said, you're a professional athlete, you're making a lot of money, you're going to put your head down, you're going to do your job, and you're going to go and you're going to play. And then if you want to leave, you can leave then. You'll be a free agent in like 4 or 5 months. And then what happens? Falls in love with the city, falls in love with the organization, falls in love with the fan base, and literally then ends up falling in love with a Canadian woman who he's now married to and has children with dual citizenships and a business partner who is from Toronto. And the ties to this city and this country and this community are still so deep, let alone the personal level, again, that we get into with stories from Jamal McClure and RJ Barrett, growing up with this team, with this city, and now playing for this organization and working for this organization. So there's a lot of stuff that stands out for me. I think a humorous moment, I honestly don't, this is terrible. I can't even remember if this made it into the book.
There's a lot of words, man. I totally get it. I don't remember what I say on the podcast every day.
I know. I've read the book 19 times. I can't even remember if this story's in the book or not. But a funny one with Jonas Valanciunas admitting when he came to Toronto and just even trying to get his phone set up was a challenge. And sitting on the end of his bed with no television, or at least no television channels that were in any kind of language that he understood, because he barely spoke a lick of English, and sitting on the end of the bed just sort of staring at his wall, waiting for practice to start the next day because his body still hadn't adjusted to the time zone difference and everything else, and just literally in an empty room by himself, away from home for essentially the first time in his life, in a different continent, let alone a different country, and just staring at a blank wall. And then later on that first week, I don't know, it was in the first couple of days, first few weeks, whatever it was, but realizing, okay, I need to go start, like I need to get a couch, let alone I need to get some food. I got to stock my fridge. I got to stock my cupboards. And he walks down the street to this big store that has an orange and white sign and it says Home Depot, and I'm going to be able to get stuff for my home. And he walks in looking for a couch and looking for groceries and wanting to buy food. And he's seeing power tools and wood. And he's like, what the hell's going on here? And he quickly learned that, of course, this is a home hardware place, a home renovation place, not a store where I can go buy food. He's like, Home Depot, I thought it's stuff for my home. Like little funny moments like that. And you start to get an appreciation for guys like a Jonas or a Jose, especially young dudes that came over with the language barrier, et cetera. So stuff like that, or Matt Bonner telling a story when he played before as his time as a Raptor. And I know this one isn't in the book, but it was a great story where Matt was talking about playing for his one season in Italy, playing for a team that, by his words, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is his thought and his words, he's convinced, he's certain that the team was owned by the mafia. And he was regularly not being paid, like missed multiple paychecks. And when his dad, who is a real large dude in height and in sort of girth, like he's an imposing figure, went to visit Matt in Italy, and Matt said, I think Matt's dad kind of, hey, how you doing? How are things going? Well, things are good, but I got to tell you, Dad, like I'm kind of not getting paid sometimes and missing paychecks and whatever. And like, it's kind of weird and frustrating. And Matt's dad, and I'm telling the story as quickly as I can here, Matt's dad sort of points towards this guy over here that's got a certain look to him. He's like, is that the owner there? I'm like, yeah, Dad, that's the owner. Yeah. But it's like, and Matt's dad promptly walks right over to him and sticks his finger in the guy's chest. And he's like, you owe my son money and you got to pay up. And Matt's kind of like, Dad, like, come on. No, it's fine. It's fine. Like, don't worry. I wound up as a speed bump somewhere in Italy. Like, just it's okay. It's okay. Like, little things like that, like just the human elements and the human moments that came out in some of the stories, again, beyond just sort of the Raptor specific stories, I thought were really cool.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll come back on the other side. I want to get into one of sort of the recurring themes of the book, Eric, and you kind of got at it with Patrick Patterson, with the sort of reticence to come to Toronto, like evolving into just like a deep held love for the city. That was a recurring story for a whole lot of dudes, including Kyle Lowry, Amir Johnson, Mike James, who was like not happy to leave after his one season in Toronto. We'll get into all that coming up in just 1 second to close things out. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the single best place to buy tickets for the sporting events you want to go to. And look, the World Cup is coming to North America for the first time since 1994 this summer, and with 48 teams for the first time ever. It's going to be huge, but let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why Game Time is clutch. It gives fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of totally impossible. You pull up the app, the layout makes it super simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. I love the seat views feature. I've used it before going to see baseball games in old rickety stadiums where there are random pillars blocking the view and strange spots within the seats. And I didn't get stuck behind no pillars because I went and used the seat view and knew exactly where I was going to be sitting, exactly what I'd be seeing. So you can go and do that as well. If you're going to a new venue for a World Cup game, don't get stuck behind a pillar. Use the seat view and all the other wonderful features that Game Time has to offer. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. It's Game Time. Today's show is also brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, logging in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from your money, expect more from yourself. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Wrapping things up here with Eric Smith, radio voice of the Toronto Raptors, co-author of We the Raptors, which you can go and get at fine bookstores right now. And Eric, let's finish off here with, I think, maybe sort of the biggest through line from a lot of the guys you spoke to that I sort of read through in this book, which was this sort of reticence to come to Toronto, the sort of backwater nature that I think we've all kind of talked about throughout our time watching this team. This has been a recurring theme of just the existence of the Toronto Raptors over the years, and the way that so many of the dudes you talked to in this book just sort of fell in love with the city upon coming here. I don't think this is like a new phenomenon. I think this has been happening for a long time now, but I do think the sort of Kyle DeMar era in particular was sort of the peak of this, right? Where Kyle comes and realizes, oh, this is a place I can really kind of be myself and grow. And wow, I love it here. And now I'm going to get a statue one day. You mentioned Patrick Patterson. I think Amir Johnson is someone who really stands out. It's just like a guy who really became all about the city. Even later, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, guys like that, I think just kind of became one with Toronto in a way that maybe didn't expect to upon arrival. And I'm curious, like, it does seem as though over the years, the sort of reputation of the city has changed. I think probably winning the championship has a lot to do with kind of, the sort of leveling up, if you will, of what was sort of the previous perception of Toronto versus what it is now. But perception is very much reality. And if a lot of players view Toronto as this backwater in a foreign country that, quote unquote, is like the Euro League team, as Kyle Lowry put in his forward, that takes a long time to wash away. Do you feel as though that has washed away from this franchise, and that they've kind of moved into a new era of being maybe not like a go-to free agent destination, because that maybe applies to like 3 cities in the entire league, but a place that people are like stoked and happy to play and don't sort of get all Patrick Patterson-y about, oh God, I'm going to Toronto. I got to get the hell out of here fast.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Sean, and I'm glad you said what you said right towards the end there. That I think it's often forgotten by folks in Toronto and Canada, let alone by a whole ton of people around the league. There are probably 3, I'll even stretch it, maybe say 5 destination teams in the NBA that seem to land more free agents than not. That doesn't mean that people don't want to come to Toronto. It means that people don't want to go to 25 other markets in the league as well. But even of those destination teams, Are those the same teams that are winning it all the time as well?
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to turn this into some sort of viral moment for the folks in Oklahoma City. I've been to Oklahoma City. I'm not here to trash Oklahoma City, but I don't think it's the most thrilling free agency destination. But what makes it thrilling now? Yes, a rabid fan base and a very passionate and dedicated fan base, but also a winning team that is among the best of the best. Trust me, there's going to be more free agents wanting to go to Oklahoma City now. And the reason I bring all this, when you win, you suddenly become sexier. You become more of a destination. I am a firm believer in winning cures all. Now, when you're losing, what are the things that maybe can help make up for losing? Well, if I'm making more money, if the weather's a little nicer, if I don't have to put on a winter coat or shovel my driveway or whatever else. There's a whole bunch of things that factor into if I'm going to lose, well, how can my life be easier then? But when you're winning, I think you're willing to look past a lot of that. And I've said this for years, and I know I'm not the only one to say this. I'm sure you've talked about similar things as well, if not the exact same thing. The cold didn't seem to matter to Michael Jordan in Chicago, and it's damn cold in Chicago. As cold, if not worse than Toronto, or in Boston with Larry Bird, or in the old great Knicks team. And it looks like New York might be one of the best even this season. People don't seem to care when you're winning. And if we look back at the Raptors' history, as we talked about earlier, you're willing to maybe give them a pass the first handful of years because it's an expansion franchise and it's new. But then you suddenly became pretty good for a handful of seasons, but it didn't last. Then there was almost a decade, right, of only making the playoffs 2 times. So when we talk about 30 years is a long time. But for the first 20, and I'm kind of like maybe twisting numbers a little bit, but not much. In the first 20, there were 5 playoff years, 5 really good years, maybe 6.
And one of them was the year they lost to the Magic in the first round, which I hope we all forget.
We're talking about a 75% to 25% bad versus good in terms of, I'm talking about winning, playing meaningful games that would thus entice or initiate interest from a free agent, not necessarily a fan base. Fan base might still be passionate, and they work. They still love their team. They still want to support their team. They still want to go watch basketball, and they're proud to have NBA basketball and professional basketball in their backyard, which they didn't have in the early 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, etc. So fans are one thing, but enticing people to come here and to want to be here and excited about here, it only makes sense that there'd be more excitement, more interest, more passion in the last 10 years when the Raptors became one of the marquee destinations because they were one of the winningest franchises in the entire league, let alone then the fan base was starting to get recognized as one of the most passionate, dedicated, etc. And to the organization's credit, what did they start doing more in the last 10, 15 years, but certainly the last 10 years, more than ever before? Taking their team out of Toronto to the rest of Canada and really buying into that Canadiana of whether it's We the North, whether it's just saying, hey, we are the only Canadian franchise. It's unfortunate and it's a travesty that Vancouver lost their team. It never should have happened. And I think Vancouver should get a chance again. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But training camps and preseason games and tours and whatnot from Halifax to Montreal to Quebec City and to, I believe, Ottawa and Calgary and into Winnipeg and Edmonton and Victoria and Vancouver, etc., taking this team across the country. And then players themselves buying into that, wanting to see these other markets, talking about these other cities, traveling in their off season, some of them, to these places. That's where I think it comes from. And I'll tell you the other thing, players that stuck around after a season because they had kids in school and saw what Toronto was like, either A, in the playoffs, which again speaks to a winning team, not just being eliminated when it's like late March, early April, and it's still cold, but playing games into May or June, it's like, holy crap, the weather's actually pretty good here. Let alone their kids in school into late June or sticking around to early July. And like, what the hell? It gets to 85, 90, 95 degrees here, to use my American Fahrenheit. You know, like, we don't talk about this with the Toronto Blue Jays. Why? They play from April to October. The bulk of their season is when it's hot and sunny and the weather's not an issue. It really does come down to wins and losses for the Jays, good or bad. It's not, we don't really ever hear about, oh, they don't want to go there because of the weather. We only talk about it in basketball and a little bit in hockey, but there's 7 Canadian teams in hockey, and we don't have a comparable NFL example. So I think that it's unfairly, this tab is unfairly placed on the Raptors specifically, of like, oh, it's Canada. Oh, it's north of the border. Oh, it's weather. No, that's just lazy. I think it really is winning and playing meaningful basketball.
Yeah, I think a guy who sort of summed up, I think, the sort of evolution of this was DeMar Carroll, where he gets into all the reasons why he in fact chose Toronto over places that offered him more money in the book. Like the Pistons had more money on the table than the Raptors did, and he ended up picking Toronto, A, because his wife kind of said we're going to Toronto, but B, because the winning element of it all was like there. The team was successful. And I will say, we don't need to linger too long on this, and you just get it out there. DeMar Carroll gets a bad rap for his time in Toronto. It sucks he got hurt. It was a bummer. He was an extremely cool guy to have around. Everyone was way too mean and angsty about what happened with him, and it's all good, and DeMar Carroll's cool. Anyway.
Can I say something real quick on that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Real quick on that, and I'll use DeMar and you bringing up that example as a jumping off point. That in a way, though, too, and maybe DeMar wouldn't agree, but I think that's what also players have grown to love about the Toronto fan base is the passion for the game and the passion for the team. And I'll use the Jason Capono example. Capono, similar to a DeMar Carroll, was a guy that came to this team that had opportunities elsewhere, that at the time was, and still could be considered this day, one of the all-time great marksmen in the league and still even in league history. And he used to walk home from games. He talks about the story in the book. He used to walk home from games, and he realized it was time to stop walking home from games when he was getting booed by people, and they were like ripping him to his face because he wasn't playing well. And he jokes about it, but he says, I actually like that because it showed that they cared. It showed that they were invested in the team, that they were following the Raptors, that they were following me, that they knew I was thinking at that point. I was going through a rough stretch. So even in moments like that, whether it's Damari or Capono or anybody else, where the fans might be fairly or unfairly getting behind the guy or trashing a guy, it's those moments where you kind of say to yourself as a player, it's like, you know what? At least they care. Other markets, maybe they don't care as much. And I think Toronto has been pretty unique in Canada, maybe arguably as well, where we can build our stars up, but also sort of leave them alone as well. Yeah, you might say hi. Yeah, you might stop for a selfie. But I think for the most part, guys can blend in the various neighborhoods and pockets of this city and of this country without necessarily just standing out and being thrown into that ridiculous, celebrity type spotlight where it's uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah. Makes sense. I have two very quick ones for you. They can be rapid fire answers to close things out here, Eric. Number one, Garrett Temple was the latest chapter in the book, the 30th guy. If there was a 31st chapter of the book to be written about a guy on the team this year, who would be your ideal subject for that chapter?
Jamal Shed.
I knew you were going to say that. Jamal rocks.
Yeah,
it's just the best.
Jamal Shed. I think he has had a very interesting life, let alone career. And I think his impact on this team is only going to be felt even more going forward this season, let alone in future seasons. And I'll tell you quickly, too, Garrett Temple was included in the book because when I heard in 2024, two guys, unprovoked, unprompted, mentioned Garrett Temple in the end of the season press conference, locker cleanout day, being a guy that as a leader, as a mentor, as a father figure, as a professional, etc., both unprompted. Nobody asked specifically about Grady Dick. It was just an overarching general question to both Scotty Barnes and to Grady Dick, and they both bring up Garrett Temple. I thought right away, that's a guy that needs to be in this book to represent the sort of new era and what these guys could ultimately be with that sort of lone vet piece on the team in a guy like Garrett Temple.
Love that. Last one. And look, we are both people who have worked in radio in Toronto over the years. And one of the guys covered in this book is Jerome Williams, one of the all-time, fan favorite per minute played guys in franchise history. My question to you, Eric, how many times has Jerome Williams barked at you on the telephone?
I don't think I have enough fingers and toes. Because I'll tell you, too, I don't even know if you remember this, but JYD was a quasi... I don't even know if he was actually, maybe he was paid. That's his business. He can get into it. But he was a quasi co-host of the post-game show back when Jonesy and I did the Raptors post-game show. So we would call the games and then still be the ones hosting the post-game show for a good hour and a half sometimes after ball games. And there was one season, I can't remember what year it was, but it was after the Real Sports Bar opened, because we would actually do the show from back when the Real Sports Store as well was right across from the Real Sports Bar. Now the Real Sports Store is in the arena itself. I believe now it's a Sport Check. Sport Check just got a shout out, and I know we're a North American show here. We're not just Canada, which, by the way, the book is available in the States and all around the world. So it's not just a Canadian thing. But we were a live window display, like we were like a zoo animals, because they couldn't open up the windows of the store. So literally, we would go into the store, walk behind where the mannequins were, and set up our table. And then we had speakers on the other side of the glass set up. And the reason I bring this up is JYD ended up co-hosting that show, probably at least half the season. So I heard that bark many a times, and like good on him, man. He certainly built a great following and a great little niche and catch for him, and it's continues to play well for him.
I produced a show in the exact same place for the other network at one point in time, and there's nothing to like get you accustomed and up to speed with being a Toronto radio producer than your very first time calling JYD, and you don't hear words on the other end. It's just ruff, 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 ruff. Okay, cool. I'm here. Great. Awesome. I've made it. We're going to leave it there, Eric. Thank you so much for spending the time. Really appreciate getting to chit chat about the book. It's We the Raptors. It's by Eric Smith and Andrew Bricker. You can get it anywhere books are sold right now. Anything you want to say as a parting shot? Anything people should be on the lookout, or special places they can find the book? Whatever you want. The floor is yours.
Well, I did just kind of touch on it, but I know that it's not just folks in Toronto and in Canada that listen to your show, and I know the Locked On Network is in every NBA city and other professional sports cities as well. So, I feel like I'm shilling, but it's certainly a cheap plug for the book that Simon & Schuster owns the worldwide rights. And I heard from somebody last week that said they live in the Philippines. They went to their local bookstore and they bought the one lone copy at this tiny little bookstore in the Philippines. I've heard from a couple of people, in fact, one just yesterday, a woman down in Tennessee who is an American, not even a transplanted Canadian, but she, for some reason, is a Raptor fan and bought the book at, I don't know if it's Amazon or Walmart or Target or whatever. So it is available in all the major bookstores and big box stores in the U.S., let alone Indigo and whatnot in Canada. So if people want to get it wherever they are in the globe, feel free to go and do so. I appreciate the support. And the cool thing too is, even though we're talking about former Raptors, obviously so many of these players, in fact, every single player in this book has played for at least one, if not 3 or 5 or 10 other organizations. So even if you're a fan of the Utah Jazz or the Miami Heat, there might be somebody in this book that played for your organization, and maybe you learned something about them or something about their life. So as much as it's rooted in a Raptor book, I think it's still a book of basketball stories and of personal stories that I think a lot of just sports fans in general would enjoy.
Good shilling, man. That's what we're here for. Shill it away, baby. Especially it's the holiday season. If you need a stocking stuffer or something, now is the time. Go get it. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Eric, for hanging out. Thanks to you, the listeners, for also hanging out. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, all the good stuff. You can join the Discord. Link in the description of the podcast. 100% free to join. We'd love to see you over there. And, of course, you can subscribe to the Locked On Raptors Every Dayer Club. $5 a month, $50 for the year gets you all ad-free episodes of the show every day, plus access to the Locked On Discord. Some other bonus perks in there as well. So please come hang out. Of course, the Raptors Locked On Raptors Discord is still free, and you can join at any time to become part of the Sicko Brigade over there. We're going to leave it. Thanks so much for hanging. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Oof.